Imagine a fighter jet so advanced, it can engage enemies without ever being seen. A machine so stealthy, even the world's most sophisticated radar systems can't catch its shadow. A jet that doesn't just fly, it gathers, processes, and shares information faster than any human pilot ever could. This isn't science fiction. It's the F-35 Lightning II, the aircraft that has quietly redefined what it means to rule the skies. Today, in the high-stakes chessboard of modern warfare, the F-35 isn't just another piece, it's the queen. Agile, unpredictable, and devastating. As headlines echo with Israeli airstrikes, tensions in the Pacific, and a new age of great power competition, the F-35 has emerged not only as a symbol of American aerospace dominance, but as the frontline weapon of choice for allies, partners, and those preparing for tomorrow's invisible wars. But how did we get here? This story doesn't begin with the roar of jet engines. It begins decades earlier with quiet blueprints, bold visions, and a desperate military need to unify air power for land, sea, and sky. It's the story of a once controversial idea, a single aircraft to serve the Air Force, Navy, and Marines, an idea met with doubt, delays, and billions of dollars in risk, but that ultimately became one of the most sophisticated pieces of military engineering ever built. In this video, we'll trace the full journey, from the earliest dreams of stealth flight to the global arms race that shaped its urgency. You'll meet the inventors, the skeptics, the generals, and the engineers who gambled everything on a vision no one thought was possible. We'll explore the secrets beneath the skin of the F-35, the stealth, the sensors, the software that thinks for itself, and we'll ask a simple but profound question: what happens when war becomes a matter of who sees first, and who never gets seen at all? This is the story of the F-35 Lightning II, and how it changed modern warfare forever. Long before the first Lightning II ever took flight, the seeds of its creation were already being sown, not in stealth hangars or classified laboratories, but in the fragmented doctrines of air power that emerged after the Cold War. In the 1980s and early 1990s, the United States military faced a growing problem. Each branch, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, was flying different aircraft, using different maintenance systems, and chasing separate upgrades. The result was costly, inefficient, and dangerously disjointed. Fighter jets, like the F-16, F-A-18, and a V-8B Harrier, were aging, expensive to maintain, and poorly integrated across services. There was no single aircraft that could fulfill the varied missions of air dominance, close air support, and vertical takeoff, all while maintaining the stealth needed for 21st century threats. At the same time, air power itself was undergoing a transformation. The 1991 Gulf War, often called the First Tech War, demonstrated just how vital air superiority had become. Precision-guided munitions, real-time satellite coordination, and advanced radar systems changed the battlefield overnight. But those same technologies made traditional fighter jets more vulnerable. The age of stealth wasn't coming. It had already arrived, yet the concept of a single multi-role aircraft was not entirely new. In the 1960s, the F-111 Aardvark attempted to serve both the Air Force and the Navy, but the project collapsed under conflicting requirements. It became a cautionary tale. One jet for all missions might be a fantasy too complex to execute. Still, the dream endured. In the mid-1990s, the Pentagon launched a bold initiative, the Joint Strike Fighter Program, a contest between aerospace giants to develop a next-generation aircraft that could replace multiple aging platforms across all service branches. It wasn't just about building a fighter jet, it was about rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. Meanwhile, stealth technology was maturing in parallel. The F-117 Nighthawk had already proven the value of radar evasion during its secretive missions over Baghdad, and the B-2 Spirit showed that stealth could be scaled to massive bombers. The real question was, could stealth be made affordable, adaptable, and universal? Enter Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and McDonnell Douglas, three of the era's aerospace titans, each proposing their vision for a jet that would not just fly, but dominate. These early concepts were awkward, experimental, and riddled with engineering trade-offs. Some resembled flying bricks, others were too costly to be feasible. Yet buried within these prototypes were the earliest glimmers of the F-35, innovations in lift fan engines, blended body designs, internal weapon bays, and integrated digital sensors. But as history has often shown, the road to revolution is never smooth. Congressional skepticism, ballooning budgets, and interbranch rivalries cast long shadows over the program. The press called it a boondoggle. Critics doubted that one jet could satisfy so many masters without compromise, and yet, the need was undeniable. The world was shifting. China and Russia were investing in radar and anti-access weapons. Rogue states were buying mobile surface-to-air systems. The battlefield was becoming more networked, more contested, and more unforgiving by the day. If America was to maintain its edge in the skies, it would need more than just a better fighter. It would need a new philosophy of flight, a jet designed not just for today, but for threats that hadn't yet been imagined. Thus began the genesis of the F-35, not from triumph, but from necessity, not as a symbol of supremacy, but as an answer to a dangerous question. How do you build the future when yesterday's solutions no longer fly? It was the year 1996. The Pentagon had just greenlit one of the most ambitious military aviation projects in history, the Joint Strike Fighter program. Billions were at stake. Three aerospace giants, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and McDonnell Douglas, stood at the starting line, each vying to design the fighter jet of the future. Only one would walk away with the contract. And the race wouldn't just change companies, it would shape the next half-century of aerial combat. Two finalists emerged, Boeing's X-32 and Lockheed Martin's X-35. At first glance, the difference was almost comical. Boeing's X-32 looked awkward, with a wide delta wing and a gaping front intake that earned it the nickname the Ugly Duckling. Lockheed's X-35, by contrast, looked sleek, refined, and perhaps more importantly, like a fighter. But beauty wasn't the measure. The competition demanded performance in three radically different configurations. The Air Force needed conventional takeoff and landing. The Navy needed carrier capability with beefed-up landing gear and foldable wings. And the Marines demanded something that had never truly been perfected: short takeoff and vertical landing, or STOVL. This last requirement had stymied engineers for decades. The British Harrier jet had achieved it barely by vectoring thrust through rotating nozzles, but it was underpowered, limited in range, and a nightmare to maintain. Could a stealth fighter really take off from a short strip and land vertically? Enter Lockheed Martin's revolutionary breakthrough, the lift fan. Inspired in part by ideas from previous DARPA experiments, the X-35B would use a shaft-driven turbine fan located behind the cockpit, powered by the jet's main engine. This fan, when engaged, would create vertical thrust, balanced by a rear, rotating nozzle and wing-mounted roll ducts. The result, a stable, powerful, and efficient vertical landing system, never before seen in any stealth aircraft. On June 24, 2001, the X-35B made aviation history. It performed a short takeoff, accelerated to supersonic speeds mid-air, and landed vertically, all in the same flight. No aircraft in the world had ever done this. Not even close. That moment tipped the scales. Boeing's X-32, despite years of effort, could not match the same versatility or finesse. Its STOVL system relied on direct lift, using brute engine force alone, and simply couldn't compete with Lockheed's more elegant solution. On October 26, 2001, the Pentagon announced the winner, Lockheed Martin. The X-35 would evolve into what we now know as the F-35 Lightning II. It was a turning point, not just in aerospace, but in military doctrine. Yet the real work was just beginning. Transforming a prototype into an operational fighter is a marathon of engineering, politics, and relentless iteration. The jet needed to be stealthy across all configurations. It had to integrate the most advanced avionics suite ever developed, including 360-degree sensor fusion, helmet-mounted targeting, and secure data link capabilities that would allow pilots to see and share the battlefield like never before. The software alone would comprise over 8 million lines of code, more than any fighter jet in history. Engineers struggled to integrate all systems without compromising weight, balance, or stealth. At times, the project threatened to collapse under its own ambition. There were failures, delays, mounting costs. Critics in Congress and the media pounced. By the late 2000s, the F-35 was being ridiculed as a bloated flying PowerPoint. But inside Lockheed's high-security skunkworks and testing facilities, a quiet revolution continued, flight by flight, line by line of code, sensor by sensor, test. Pilots like John Beasley and Tom Morgenfeld became legends, risking their lives to push prototypes to the limit, diving into uncharted flight envelopes and returning with crucial data. Military partners from the UK, Italy, Australia, and others began investing in the program, giving it global momentum. And behind the scenes, the real magic was emerging. A fighter that didn't just fly the mission, it understood it. The distributed aperture system, for instance, could track missiles from all directions and beam that information straight into the pilot's helmet. No heads-up display, no cockpit gauges, just a virtual overlay in the visor, showing everything the jet saw in real time. A pilot didn't need to look at a target, they simply knew where it was. This was no longer about speed or altitude. The F-35 had quietly become the first cognitive jet, a machine that could absorb data, prioritize threats, and give the pilot a godlike view of the battlefield. By the time the first production F-35s rolled out in the early 2010s, the world had changed. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan had highlighted the need for precision, information dominance, and survivability in contested zones. Russia and China were rapidly investing in anti-access technologies, and the age of air superiority, long taken for granted, was once again under threat. The F-35 wasn't just a fighter jet anymore, it was a statement of intent, of capability, and of a new kind of warfare, where the most dangerous weapon might not be what you see, but what you never see coming. When Lockheed Martin won the Joint Strike Fighter contract in 2001, the real challenge had only just begun. Turning the X-35 prototype into the fully operational F-35 Lightning II wasn't a matter of painting new tail numbers or adding rivets. It was a complete metamorphosis, a global industrial campaign, a technological leap, and a gamble involving over a dozen nations and trillions in future defense planning. Let's trace the F-35's ascent, decade by decade, variant by variant, and mission by mission to understand how it evolved from an ambitious prototype into the defining warplane of the 21st century. After winning the contract, Lockheed Martin immediately began reshaping the X-35 into three distinct but unified variants: F-35A for the US Air Force, Conventional Takeoff and Landing 35B for the US Marine Corps and UK Royal Navy, Short Takeoff, Vertical Landing 35C for the US Navy, carrier-based operations with larger wings and reinforced landing gear. This family of fighters approach was unprecedented. Most aircraft in history had been purpose-built for one service. The F-35 had to serve 3, plus dozens of international customers, while keeping production costs within reach. It didn't take long for friction to emerge. The software backbone proved complex. Engineers had to design a new assembly line process involving global suppliers, from Pratt & Whitney's powerful F135 engine to composite materials sourced across Europe and Asia. Flight tests began in 2006. The first F-35A took to the skies on December 15th that year. But this was just the beginning of a years-long test campaign involving thousands of flight hours and hundreds of REDESIGNS. By the late 2000s, the program was in troubled waters. Development costs had ballooned. Critics in the US government called it a money pit. International partners questioned the delivery timeline. Some countries even threatened to pull out. But behind the scenes, technical milestones were being quietly achieved. In 2008, the F-35B successfully completed its first vertical landing, a stunning validation of the lift fan system. By 2011, the first Lorette production jets were delivered to the US military, and pilot training began. 2012 saw the debut of the Autonomic Logistics Information System, OLIS, designed to manage everything from maintenance to mission planning, though the system would later require major overhauls. Despite the chaos, more countries signed on. The UK, Italy, Australia, Norway, Canada, Japan, and others became program partners or customers. For some, it was about interoperability with the US. For others, it was about entering the stealth age on a budget without building their own platforms from scratch. Still, the F-35's image in the press was battered. Mechanical faults, delayed deliveries, soaring costs. It was the most expensive weapons system in history, and yet it was still growing. This period marked the F-35's graduation from concept to combat-ready platform. In 2015, the U.S. Marine Corps declared initial operational capability, IOC, for the F-35B, the first service branch to do so. In 2016, the Air Force followed with the F-35A, and by 2019, the Navy declared the F-35C operational. That same year, the F-35 saw its first combat. Israeli Air Force F-35 Ayadir jets struck targets in Syria, marking the stealth jet's first confirmed use in live warfare. These operational rollouts weren't just symbolic, they revealed the jet's real strength. Situational dominance. In red flag exercises, the U.S. Air Force's most realistic combat simulations, F-35s were recording kill ratios of 20-1 against fourth-generation adversaries. Pilots reported seeing threats before they were even detected. The fighter had become a flying brain, part aircraft, part sensor network. During this era, key upgrades also appeared. Block 3F software, unlocking full combat capability, including all weapons bays and mission profile shell mid-mounted display system, allowing pilots to see through the aircraft using infrared cameras mounted around the jet's body. Enhanced electronic warfare capabilities, enabling jamming, radar spoofing, and early missile warning. More nations followed Israel's lead. Japan purchased F-35AS and began converting its Izumo-class carriers to deploy the STOVL-capable F-35B, effectively giving Japan its first aircraft carriers since World War II. South Korea and Singapore joined in, eyeing regional power shifts. Turkey, a key manufacturing partner, was later removed from the program in 2019 over its decision to buy Russian S-400 missile systems. By 2020, the F-35 had transitioned from promise to presence. Over 900 jets had been delivered. It was flying from U.S. carriers, remote bases, and partner airfields around the world. This period also saw a sharp uptick in combat operations. The U.S. Air Force deployed F-35 as 4 deterrence missions in the Pacific and Europe. Israel continued covert strikes in Iran and Syria, relying on the F-35's unmatched stealth and data fusion. The UK Royal Navy launched F-35Bs from HMS Queen Elizabeth, signaling Britain's return to carrier operations. At the same time, Lockheed Martin launched a continuous capability development and delivery C2D2 strategy, essentially turning the F-35 into a constantly evolving platform. Block for upgrades began. Better radar, new weapons compatibility, faster computing power, and enhanced pilot interfaces. LIS was replaced by ODIN, a streamlined logistics network aimed at solving years of digital maintenance headaches. New classified electronic warfare modes and AI-driven threat recognition began appearing in test builds. By now, more than 18 countries had committed to the jet, making it the most widely adopted stealth fighter in history. And still, evolution continued. Export models were tailored. New production lines opened in Japan and Italy, and the Pentagon, seeing how the geopolitical winds were shifting, doubled down on integrating the F-35 into future warfighting networks, linking it with satellites, drones, ground forces, and other jets in what some have called the Internet of War. 2001, Lockheed Martin wins JSF competition. 2006, first F-35 flight. 2008, first vertical landing F-35B. 2015 to 2019, all U.S. variants achieve operational status. 2019 to 2024, combat proven in multiple theaters. Global sales expansion. Next-gen upgrades begin. The F-35 wasn't just evolving, it was absorbing every lesson of modern warfare, from data fusion to pilot ergonomics, from geopolitical alliances to cyber defense. Today, it sits at the center of NATO doctrine. It flies missions in Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. It trains beside Polish, Finnish, and Australian squadrons, and in every scenario, contested airspace, first strike raids, defensive patrols, it's setting a new standard. What began as a single concept is now a family of stealth fighters. What started as a bet is now a benchmark, and what once struggled to prove itself now leads the sky. By the mid-2020s, the F-35 was no longer an experimental marvel or a headline-making controversy. It had become a mainstay of global air power, the centerpiece of modern military planning from the United States to the Indo-Pacific. But its rise wasn't just about numbers or deployments. It marked a fundamental shift in how nations prepare for war, project power, and even define the very concept of a fighter jet. The revolution had arrived, and it came not with fanfare, but with quiet ubiquity. One of the biggest catalysts for mainstream adoption was simple: data dominance. Unlike its predecessors, the F-35 wasn't designed around pure speed, maneuverability, or firepower alone. It was built around information, how fast it could gather it, interpret it, and share it across the battlefield. In a conflict environment, defined by milliseconds and invisibility, that made all the difference. Suddenly, legacy fourth-generation jets began to look obsolete. They couldn't see as far. They couldn't jam as precisely. They couldn't disappear on radar. More importantly, they couldn't talk, not the way the F-35 could, to ground units, to ships, to satellites, to other jets in real time. This wasn't just a fighter. It was an information node, a flying command center. That's why adoption accelerated. Countries no longer saw the F-35 as just an elite tool for a few missions. They saw it as a force multiplier, something that made every other asset on the battlefield smarter, faster, and safer. And so, Japan upgraded its naval strategy by integrating F-35Bs on converted helicopter carriers. South Korea stationed F-35 as within minutes of North Korean airspace. The UK Royal Navy, after decades without a carrier-based stealth jet, flew F-35Bs off HMS Queen Elizabeth, projecting British power from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific. Even small nations like Denmark, Belgium, and Finland saw the strategic value. Buying a few dozen F-35s didn't just mean air defense. It meant interoperability with NATO. It meant deterrence. It meant digital combat readiness in a world where cyber threats and missile defense systems were just as important as dogfighting skills. This societal shift wasn't limited to military playbooks. It rippled into industry, training, and culture. Entire aerospace ecosystems were reshaped. Jobs in Italy, Turkey before its removal, the UK, and Japan became tied to the production of components. Global logistics chains formed. The demand for F-35 trained pilots and technicians surged, pushing innovation in simulation, augmented reality, and remote diagnostics. In Hollywood and gaming, the F-35 began replacing older icons like the F-14 or F-22 in defense circles. It became the gold standard, the bar by which every new Chinese or Russian jet was measured. Even for civilians, the jet became symbolic of precision, of futuristic power, of a war no longer defined by noisy afterburners but by silent strikes and unseen presence. And underneath it all, the culture of war planning had changed. No longer were nations just buying jets. They were buying into a system, one that promised connectivity, stealth, and survivability in the next war. Even if that war hasn't happened yet. The F-35 revolution wasn't loud. It wasn't brash. It was quiet, precise, total. And it marked the moment when the future of warfare stopped being theoretical and started flying. As the world stepped into the 2020s, the F-35 Lightning II was no longer just a cutting-edge aircraft. It had become a living system, constantly evolving, continuously updated, and globally integrated. Unlike traditional warplanes that age into obsolescence, the F-35 was built to adapt. And in the past 2 decades, that adaptability has taken center stage. The original vision, a family of stealth fighters, serving multiple services and allies, has held firm. But now, it's expanding in ways even its designers didn't fully anticipate. At the heart of this evolution is the Block for Upgrade program, a sweeping enhancement initiative already underway. This isn't just a software patch. Block for adds new sensors, stronger computing power, expanded weapon compatibility, and more AI-assisted targeting capabilities. It transforms the F-35 into what some call a quarterback of the battlefield, orchestrating not just air missions, but coordinating strikes between ships, ground troops, and even unmanned drones. This digital brain is powered by the replacement of the outdated ALICE system with ODIN, the Operational Data Integrated Network. ODIN fixes the reliability issues that once plagued F-35 maintenance and logistics. Now, the jet can diagnose itself, report faults before they happen, and automatically request parts or repairs before returning to base. Meanwhile, diversification continues. The F-35A, built for speed and precision, remains the workhorse for air forces around the world. The F-35B, with its short takeoff and vertical landing capabilities, allows operations from improvised airstrips, island bases, or amphibious assault ships. The F-35C, with its larger wings and rugged design, anchors American naval air power on aircraft carriers. Each variant is evolving on its own track, fine-tuned to its mission while retaining the unified stealth architecture and shared tech core. New customers are still joining the program. In 2023, Switzerland and Finland finalized major procurement deals. In 2024, Germany moved toward F-35 acquisition to modernize its nuclear-capable aircraft fleet. The jet's global footprint now spans over 19 allied nations, forming a connected fleet of interoperable stealth fighters, a coalition in the sky. But this era hasn't been without criticism or concern. Environmental groups point to the jet's carbon footprint and high operating costs. Technologists debate the vulnerabilities of overconnected systems in an age of cyber warfare. And defense economists worry about over-reliance on a single platform, a big fail fighter that could leave gaps if compromised. There's also strategic tension. Russia and China continue to push forward with their own stealth programs, the Su-57 and J-20, respectively, hoping to match or outpace the F-35 in future generations. And while these jets remain less battle-tested, they raise new questions about air dominance in multi-theater scenarios. Still, the F-35 stands unmatched in one crucial way. It's here now, flying, fighting, and winning. It dominates NATO war games. It's integrated into Pacific defense strategy. It's already in combat in the Middle East, and it's linking seamlessly with other US assets, like the B-21 Raider, Aegis missile systems, and future loyal wingman drones, to build an air power network unlike anything the world has seen. The F-35 has proven that warfighters no longer need to wait for the future. It's already taken off, and the rest of the world is trying to catch up. The story of the F-35 Lightning II is not merely one of military hardware, it's a chronicle of transformation. A transformation in how wars are prepared for, how information is weaponized, and how nations define strength in an increasingly digital battlefield. Before the F-35, air superiority was measured in speed, altitude, and raw firepower. Dogfights were up close. Pilots relied on radar screens and cockpit gauges. Air campaigns unfolded in waves, one sortie at a time. The F-35 rewrote those rules. It turned air combat into a connected ecosystem where stealth, data, and software determine victory long before a missile is fired. Its impact can be seen across every axis of modern defense. In technology, it pushed forward the boundaries of AI integration, sensor fusion, and autonomous diagnostics. Technologies now influencing everything from next-gen tanks to future submarines. In military doctrine, it redefined how forces organize, shifting from platform-based thinking to network-centric warfare. No longer does a fighter operate alone. In the F-35 era, it is one node in a vast, intelligent web of decision-making. In global strategy, it reshaped alliances. Nations that once relied on outdated fleets were suddenly empowered with fifth-generation capabilities, strengthening interoperability and deterrence. The F-35 infrastructure and tactics brought NATO closer. It rebalanced power in Asia. It gave smaller countries a voice in high-end conflict planning. And in industry, it changed how aerospace works, birthing an international supply chain that spans over 1,500 companies across 3 continents. For better or worse, the F-35 is not just a fighter jet, it is an economy. The aircraft itself will continue evolving for decades. With Block 4 enhancements, software upgrades, and modular weapon integration, its capabilities are still expanding. Pilots who once trained in simulators now enter combat with real-time battlefield data fused into their vision, a capability born from this very program. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the F-35 is philosophical. It taught us that superiority is no longer about being the loudest in the sky, but the smartest. That survivability doesn't come from thicker armor, but from not being seen at all. And that the future of combat lies not in more fire, but in more foresight. For all its controversies and complications, the F-35 stands today as a turning point, a line drawn in the clouds between what air power was and what it has become. As the F-35 continues to soar across global skies, one question remains: what comes next? Even as it dominates the present, the F-35 was never designed to be the final word in aerial warfare. Instead, it's a stepping stone, a foundation upon which the next generation of air dominance will be built. And already, the future is taking shape. At Lockheed Martin, and within US Air Force planning circles, work is underway on what's being called NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance. This sixth-generation initiative envisions a manned aircraft operating alongside AI-powered drones, ultra-long-range weapons, and sensor arrays that operate in multiple spectrums. Some call it a system of systems, a flying brain. Surrounded by a constellation of lethal extensions, the F-35 may not be replaced so much as joined by semi-autonomous loyal wingman drones, by space-based sensor relays, and by algorithms that turn threat data into instant countermeasures. Imagine a world where the pilot becomes more of a mission commander, overseeing a fleet of robotic companions, all flying in perfect sync. Then there's quantum radar, directed energy weapons, and hypersonic threat detection, all areas where F-35 successors will need to adapt. But interestingly, many of these technologies are being tested and refined through the F-35 itself. In other words, the Lightning II is not aging, it's evolving forward. There's also speculation about the rise of regional stealth fighters, lower cost, mission-specific aircraft built by nations like South Korea, India, and even Saudi Arabia. Will they challenge the F-35, or will they simply coexist beneath its shadow? And finally, the human side. With the rise of virtual pilot training, helmet-integrated augmented reality, and AI co-pilots, the very experience of flight is changing. Will the next great fighter pilot fly with a stick, or with gestures, thoughts, and neural interfaces? We can't know for certain, but we do know this: the sky is no longer the limit. It's just the launch pad. So now we ask you, the viewer, what do you think the fighter jet of 2050 will look like? Will there even be pilots in the cockpit, or just ghosts in the code? Let us know in the comments. From a bold idea to a global force, the story of the F-35 Lightning II is more than the tale of a jet. It's the story of a world redefined by stealth, speed, and digital warfare. We've followed its journey from the early dreams of a unified strike fighter, through engineering triumphs and political storms, to its rise as the centerpiece of modern military power. Along the way, it reshaped industries, rewrote doctrines, and set the stage for a new era in global defense strategy. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the technology, history, and legacy of the F-35. If you found this video insightful, like the video, share it with fellow aviation or tech enthusiasts, and subscribe to the channel for more high-impact stories about the machines and minds that shape our world. And as always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.